Let's go over to the New Orleans Saints. They went 7-10 as well. Last year was kind of a dumpster fire to say the least. I don't know, just they definitely lost a lot of luster. Granted, they're more new head coach, so maybe they're more defensive. They were a more defensive minded team, a little bit less spark on offense. Probably why they let go of quarterback Andy Dalton, as he filled in for a bit there, and edge rusher Marcus Davenport, former first round pick, and a couple of the defensive linemen and David Onyemata and Shai Tuttle. They did bring in quarterback Derek Carr, so hopefully that stabilizes the quarterback position. That's kind of been in flux since Breeze left. And then also grabbed running back Jamal Williams, tight end Foster Moreau, and defensive tackle Kalen Saunders. Then draft-wise, they went defense again and drafted defensive lineman Brian Breesy out of Clemson in round 1. Also went defense in its second round with edge rusher Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame. And then running back Kendre Miller out of TCU in round 3. So, John, what are your thoughts on the Saints and Derek Carr?
The Saints are a really interesting team because there's a lot of key players here that I think, just depending on what happens with them, could make the season be successful or not. Number one is Alvin Kamara. Suspension. It's only 3 games, which is good for him. When he comes back, is he ready to go? Last year, he wasn't very efficient in his overall touches. Jamal Williams is going to come in, and I think that dynamic punch could help. Then they also drafted Kendre Miller. So the whole running back room is just interesting. Also, will Michael Thomas finally have a full season of health? There were moments last year he looked really solid. So, fingers crossed, knock on wood, that he can do so. The offensive line is interesting, specifically Trevor Penning at left tackle. Didn't have the greatest of starts to his career, but there's still a lot of hope for him that he can, really become that guy that they need to be, their starting left tackle. And then same on defense, you got some interesting people like Brian Breesy, who you just mentioned. I was pretty high on him coming out of the draft. I don't know if anyone remembers, but he was actually the number 1 recruit in his high school class over Bryce Young, I'm pretty sure. I think they were the same class. And, or maybe he was a class before. I don't know. I can't remember which high school class he was specifically, but regardless, he was like a top recruit in his class, and he was really good at Clemson. Only issue was he couldn't really stay healthy for a lot of the time that he was there, which was unfortunate. And so if he can stay healthy, he could maybe become a really dominant player on that defensive line for them, especially when you have, Cameron Jordan on that defensive line. You need as much help as you can get to take pressure off of him, because we know that they're going to potentially try and send some double teams his way. So having someone else could be helpful. And then also, I'm really interested to see how Paulson Adebo specifically progresses this year on the outside. He had moments so far in his career where it felt like he was really solid, but then also, corner's just a position that takes a while, and you don't always have the cleanest starts to your career. So he had some moments too where he was not very good. But if he can become a really strong corner opposite of Marshawn Lattimore, that secondary could be something serious with Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus Mays over at the safety positions. So I don't know. I feel like the Saints are very interesting. I feel like they're the most sound team out of the division, just because Derek Carr, love him or hate him, he's a good veteran quarterback. Outside of, the unknown effect of Ritter and Bryce Young, he's the best quarterback in the division. Who knows? Maybe Ritter or Young really popped this year, but he's the best quarterback in the division as of today. And, when Kamara's back, if there's health on some of these other positions, they have a pretty solid team. I'm not going to say they're going to go out there and make a ton of noise in the NFC, but I certainly think that considering the state of this division and what it was last year, I wouldn't be shocked if they were to go out there and win it. And who knows? Maybe they could be a pretty decent team in the NFC overall. So, yeah, the Saints are really interesting. I don't really have too many things to say about their overall offseason because they didn't really lose anybody that big. And the additions they did add, I thought were solid. Like, I like adding Derek Carr. I like adding Jamal Williams just as assurance behind Kamara, because at the time too they didn't know how long Kamara's suspension would be. So I don't know. It wasn't like a crazy offseason, but I think it just kind of shored up some spots that, barring health on the rest of the roster, they could be pretty interesting.
Yeah, agreed. I really like the Jamal Williams, not just because former Packer and open dweeb basically, but hey, good for him. But that you mentioned Kamara suspension, but also Kamara. It seems like he's always done best when he's kind of splitting, not taking as much of the load. Mm-hmm. And we've seen whether in Detroit or Green Bay, Jamal Williams can kind of do it all, true 3-down back, but is still very good at splitting, at being a number 2 or 1A, 1B. And then if Kamara does miss time because injury has been an issue for him sometimes, little ones and such, where we've seen Jamal Williams can absolutely be the guy for a couple of weeks. Can, like I said, can do it all, pass protect, can be a receiving back, but can also run between the tackles and still not be as much of a drop off as opposed to your main star running back. So I love that. And yes, obviously Derek Carr, like you mentioned, better stability at quarterback. Is not going to make the reckless decisions of Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton. Won't make as many in theory though, and we've mentioned it kind of with the Raiders when we used to talk about them, but this for sure, this probably is going to be the best defense he's played with or had basically his whole career. And in regards to the Saints defense, because that was one of the few shining points last year was their defense, and they keep investing in it, with Brian Breesy and Isaiah Foskey and, Peyton Turner from a couple of years ago. So hopefully, Turner, although it was a little bit of a head scratcher at the time, who knows? Maybe they got something cooking there. We'll see. And Demario Davis still really good for them at linebacker. So, they're definitely going to be a team I'm be considering putting in the playoffs when we're doing our season predictions. Like I said, with this wide open division, I wouldn't be shocked if they would win the division outright with the weapons they have. Rashid Shaheed was really good for them at the end of last year, and Juwan Johnson had moments too. So if it all can come together, they could kind of have like a Seahawks type season this year where everyone's like, oh, where'd this come from? I won't be shocked if they're somehow 10-7, maybe too, because they may have a favorable schedule as well.